Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Monday, August 5th, 2024. The Dow Jones Industrial Average falls 1,000 points, and stock markets around the world drop dramatically as well. More reaction to the U.S. jobs report from Friday that some see as showing signs the U.S. economy is slowing, and concern the Federal Reserve may not have cut interest rates soon enough. President Joe Biden convenes his national security team at the White House as Iran says it has a moral duty to respond to the killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran. Israel says it's ready for any military attack. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, expected to announce her vice presidential running mate before a joint campaign appearance in Philadelphia Tuesday night. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says his state has seen a significant storm surge and flooding from Hurricane Debby. But power outages, while substantial, are not as widespread as previous more powerful hurricanes that hit the state. Story from AP, nearly everything on Wall Street is tumbling Monday as fear about a slowing U.S. economy worsens and sets off another sell-off for financial markets around the world. And the Dow today down 1,033 points, NASDAQ down 576, S&P down 160. More from the AP article. Japan's Nikkei 225 helped start Monday by plunging 12.4% for its worst day since the Black Monday crash of 1987. It was the first chance for traders in Tokyo to react to Friday's report showing U.S. employers slowed their hiring last month by much more than economists expected. That was the latest piece of data on the U.S. economy to come in weaker than expected, and it's all raised fear the Federal Reserve has pressed the brakes on the U.S. economy by too much for too long through high interest rates in hopes of stifling inflation, reporting from Associated Press. This morning, Austin Goolsbee, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, was interviewed on CNBC by reporter Steve Leisman.
The market is priced for 150 basis points or more of cuts by through January, for a 50 in September. Is the market over its skis here? Do you think it's sort of embraced a panic about the economy that you don't have?
Well, look, you know I never like binding ourselves ahead of time before meetings, even a single meeting, much less 5-6 meetings from now, because we're going to get a lot of information. It seems like there's a lot going on in the world as well. You got the Bank of Japan raising rates when everybody else is cutting rates or thinking of cutting rates. And so you got movements in the exchange rate. And so the international component of this is probably a little more complicated. I think the market's reaction, if you just plot out what their projected Fed funds rate will be, and plot it against what the actual Fed funds rate does, you can see that it's the market's job to react and it's the Fed's job to act. And one of those moves with a lot more volatility than the other.
I understand, I think, what you're saying there. Is there a chance, Austin, you think, of an emergency cut between now and September?
Look, like I say, I'm forbidden to talk about what people's opinions are or speak for the committee. You've seen the table. It's a huge table. So everything is always on the table, whether that's increases, cuts, et cetera. But the Fed's job is very straightforward. Maximize employment, stabilize prices, and maintain financial stability. That's what we're going to do. We're forward-looking about it. And so if the conditions collectively start coming in that on the through line, there's deterioration on any of those parts, we're going to fix it.
Austin Goolsbee, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, this morning on CNBC. Again, the Wall Street numbers, the Dow closing down 1,033, NASDAQ down 576, S&P down 160, Dow and the S&P registering the biggest daily losses in September 2022. Story from Newsweek. Former President Donald Trump laid blame for poor stock market performance on the current administration, despite previously taking credit for record highs under President Joe Biden's leadership. Trump posted on Truth Social, "Stock markets crashing. I told you so. Kamala doesn't have a clue. Biden is sound asleep. All caused by inept U.S. leadership." Donald Trump in his post also referring to the Kamala crash. The Newsweek article has this paragraph: in January, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average increased to 38,000 for the first time after a 1,000-point jump in 40 days, Trump posted, "This is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors are projecting that I will win, and that will drive the market up." Also from the Washington Examiner, Gene Sperling, a top economic advisor to President Joe Biden, is leaving his White House job to join Vice President Kamala Harris's 2024 campaign. Sperling, who previously served as director of the National Economic Council under former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, is expected to fill the role of senior economic advisor to Vice President Harris. Turning to the Middle East, this from The Guardian: Iran has called in foreign ambassadors based in Tehran to warn of the country's moral duty to punish Israel for what it sees as its adventurism and lawbreaking in assassinating Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, a week ago in the Iranian capital. Iran has also secured an emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on Wednesday, where it will try to press Arab states to back its right to take reprisal actions against Israel. That was from The Guardian. President Joe Biden, joined by Vice President Kamala Harris, meeting this afternoon at the White House with the national security team. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while meeting with Australia's foreign minister on a different issue at the State Department, took a minute to talk about the situation in the Middle East.
Before I begin, though, a few words on the situation in the Middle East, because it is a critical moment. We are engaged in intense diplomacy, pretty much round the clock, with a very simple message. All parties must refrain from escalation. All parties must take steps to ease tensions. Escalation is not in anyone's interests. It will only lead to more conflict, more violence, more insecurity. It's also critical that we break this cycle by reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. That, in turn, will unlock possibilities for more enduring calm, not only in Gaza itself, but in other areas where the conflict could spread. So for the United States, for many other countries, both in the region and beyond, this is our focus. And what it comes down to, really, is all parties finding ways to come to an agreement, not look for reasons to delay or to say no. It is urgent that all parties make the right choices in the hours and days ahead.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken today at the State Department at the start of a meeting with the Australian foreign minister. Story from the Times of Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stop BSing me during their phone conversation on Thursday, a report said Saturday evening. Channel 12 News reported, without citing sources, that the outburst had come after Netanyahu told Biden that Israel was moving forward with negotiations on a hostages for a ceasefire deal with Hamas and would soon send a delegation to resume talks. Those talks have been ongoing for many months without results, and Biden has previously opined that Netanyahu has been intentionally stalling for internal political reasons. That story from the Times of Israel. At today's State Department briefing with spokesperson Matthew Miller, a reporter asked about the ceasefire and hostage negotiations.
On prospects for a ceasefire deal, which this department and other agencies in the U.S. government have been stressing is a crucial key step. I mean, it appears notable that the talks over the weekend in Cairo were hours long. The CIA director was not there. Not to say that an absence of an altogether absence of the U.S. presence, but isn't that an indication that there's nowhere to go on ceasefire talks right now? I mean, how would you characterize them? Are they not stalled?
So I wouldn't characterize them as stalled. I would characterize them the way we have said before, which is we have reached an agreement on the framework. That agreement still stands. Nothing that's happened over the course of the past week has done anything to erode the fundamental agreement on the framework to this ceasefire. That stands, but where we also what's true is that we continue to have other areas where we need to bridge the differences between the two parties. And so, look, ultimately, it's not a decision the United States can make. It requires the parties to take these choices, and it requires the parties to get to yes, and not look for reasons to delay and not look for reasons to say no. And so the message that we have consistently communicated to everyone in the region is we want to see a ceasefire. We think a ceasefire is in the interest of Israel. It's in the interest of the Israeli people. It's in the interest of the Palestinian people. It is in the interest of the broader region. So we are going to continue to use all of the diplomatic muscle, all the influence that we can bring to bear to push to get this ceasefire over the line.
And since this is the first time we're hearing from you specifically, I mean, would you say that the assassination of Hania, who was, of course, a lead negotiator in these talks, was at least not conducive to seeing them brought over the finish line?
The president spoke to this over the weekend, and I think I'll let his words stand. He said it certainly didn't help.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference at the State Department in Washington. The United Nations has fired 9 staff members from the agency responsible for Palestinian refugees over their possible roles in Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. Farhan Haq is deputy spokesperson for the Secretary General.
You've been asking for a long time about the Office of Internal Oversight Services work concerning the UN Relief and Works Agency. I can tell you the following. The Office of Internal Oversight Services has completed its investigation into 19 area staff members of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, regarding allegations of their involvement in the armed attacks of the 7th of October 2023 in southern Israel. OIOS made findings in relation to each of the 19 UNRWA staff members alleged to have been involved in the attacks. In one case, no evidence was obtained by OIOS to support the allegations of the staff members' involvement, while in 9 other cases, the evidence obtained by OIOS was insufficient to support the staff members' involvement. With respect to these 10 cases, appropriate measures will be taken in due course in conformity with UNRWA regulations and rules. In respect of the remaining 9 cases, the evidence obtained by OIOS indicated that the UNRWA staff members may have been involved in the armed attacks of the 7th of October 2023. The employment of these individuals will be terminated in the interests of the agency.
Farhan Haq, deputy spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General at a UN news conference in New York City. An NBC News article reads, UNRWA is a UN aid organization established in 1949 to provide aid and protection to Palestinian refugees in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. The agency has moved much-needed humanitarian aid into Gaza, which has been under intense Israeli bombardment for months. There are about 30,000 UNRWA workers across the region, including 13,000 in Gaza, according to the agency. That was from NBC News. The United States, writes AFP, called Monday for calm in Bangladesh after long-ruling leader Sheikh Hasina fled and saluted the military for forming an interim government instead of cracking down further on protesters. Hasina had thought to quell nationwide protests against her government since early July, but she fled the country after nearly 100 people were killed on Sunday. And from Reuters, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was caught by surprise by a defense official's decision to agree to plea deals with the man accused of masterminding the September 11th attacks, along with 2 of his accomplices, the Pentagon said on Monday, a move the Pentagon chief revoked last week. On Friday, Austin revoked the plea deals for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 2 others and relieved Susan Escalier, who oversees the Pentagon's Guantanamo War Court, of her authority to enter into pretrial agreements in the case and took on the responsibility himself. Austin's move means that the 3 could eventually face a death penalty trial. Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh said the secretary was certainly surprised, as we all were. She said that throughout the entire process, the secretary was not consulted because it is an independent process. That was from Reuters. Today, Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, Republican from New York, interviewed on Newsmax, called for pursuing the death penalty for these 3 suspects.
Last year, Senator Ted Cruz and I wrote to Secretary Austin and this administration because we felt very strongly that we should not be pursuing any type of plea deal, that anything less than the death penalty was unacceptable to not just us, but to the thousands of people who have lost loved ones either on 9/11 or in the days since because of 9/11 related illnesses. Obviously, those pleas fell on deaf ears and they decided to proceed with this plea deal. And it wasn't until the outrage from the family members, from the first responder organizations and politicians that they decided to reverse course. The bottom line here is there was a trial date set in 2021. This administration came in, it was postponed because of COVID. and it was supposed to take place September of 2021. And then they decided to pursue this plea deal instead. And so all of this has delayed the trial by years. And what the families want is to see justice served. It's been 23 years. They deserve that. And these monster terrorists do not deserve to continue to live. And we want to see the death penalty pursued and that justice is finally served for all Americans.
Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, Republican from New York, on Newsmax today. The White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby was asked about these cases yesterday on Fox News Sunday.
This week, the Secretary of Defense rescinded the plea deal that would have spared the 9/11 plotters the death penalty. Did President Biden ask him to do that?
This was a decision made by the Secretary of Defense. It was an independent decision by him, certainly within his authorities, as in the chain of command at the Defense Department.
Well, the administration had a hard time defending it this week. I want to play for you some sound here.
We're going to talk to one of the families of the victims coming up here in 30 minutes. As you can best assume, they are not happy.
No, of course not. And certainly we recognize and understand the concerns that they've expressed.
Our hearts go out to the families who lost a loved one. We are determined to make sure that they get justice. These families get justice.
So is the president willing to let these terrorists escape the harshest penalty in the system of justice and let that be part of his legacy?
Again, this was a decision made by a convening authority in the military chain of command, an independent convening authority.
He didn't weigh in at all.
Secretary of Defense has the authority to change the delegation of that authority to the convening authority. I know that sounds kind of complicated, but he has the authority to do that. He did this on his own.
Did the president weigh in?
This was a decision made by the Secretary of Defense.
John Kirby, White House National Security Communications Advisor, on Fox News Sunday yesterday. The executive director of the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, Anthony Romero, putting out a statement. By revoking a signed plea agreement, Secretary Austin has prevented a guilty verdict in the most important criminal case of the 21st century. This rash act also violates the law, and we will challenge it in court. It's stunning that Secretary Austin betrayed 9/11 family members seeking judicial finality while recklessly setting aside the judgment of his own prosecutors and the convening authority, who are actually steeped in the 9/11 case. Politics and command influence should play no role in this legal proceeding. Yet Secretary Austin dishonored an agreement reached after years of hard work and painstaking consultation by all the parties involved. Part of the statement from the ACLU Executive Director, Anthony Romero. Washington Today continues in a moment.
As more people cancel cable TV, C-SPAN's funding is at risk. This summer, an anonymous donor has stepped up to help by matching all donations up to $25,000. I'm Caitlin with C-SPAN, and this means your gift will go twice as far. Your donation supports unfiltered access to government and public affairs programming, including the C-SPAN podcasts you value. Visit cspan.org/donate to make your gift today. Every dollar helps us reach our $25,000 goal. Thank you for listening and supporting C-SPAN. Donate today at cspan.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Usha Vance, the wife of Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, gave her first solo interview of the 2024 campaign. Asked today in a Fox News interview about a soundbite from her husband from a few years ago that has gotten attention lately. The one that said that women without children are childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives.
In 2021, JD said, "We are effectively run by a bunch of childless cat ladies," taking aim at government leaders who don't have children. What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, I took a moment to look and actually see what he had said and try to understand what the context was and all that, which is something that I really wish people would do a little bit more often. And the reality is, he made a quip in service of making a point that he wanted to make that was substantive, and it had actual meaning. And I just wish sometimes that people would talk about those things and that we would spend a lot less time just sort of going through this three-word phrase or that three-word phrase, because what he was really saying is that it can be really hard to be a parent in this country. And sometimes our policies are designed in a way that make it even harder. And we should be asking ourselves, why is that? true? What is it about our leadership and the way that they think about the world that makes it so hard sometimes for parents? And that's the conversation that I really think that we should have, and I understand why he was saying that.
What do you say to the women who were offended or were hurt by that?
Well, I think I would say, first of all, that JD absolutely, at the time and today, would never, ever, ever want to say something to hurt someone who was trying to have a family, who really, was struggling with that. And he made that clear at the time, and he's made that clear today. And we have lots of friends who have been in that position. It is challenging and never, ever anything that anyone would want to mock or make fun of. And I also understand there are a lot of other reasons why people may choose not to have families, and many of those reasons are very good. I think what I would say is, let's try to look at the real conversation that he's trying to have and engage with it and understand, for those of us who do have families, for the many of us who want to have families and for whom it's really hard, what can we do to make it better? What can we do to make it easier to live in 2024?
Usha Vance, the wife of Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Republican vice presidential nominee, in a Fox News interview. Story from NBC News. Vice President Harris is expected to reveal her vice presidential pick Tuesday ahead of their first rally together in Philadelphia that evening, according to two sources familiar with the plan. These people caution that the timing of the announcement is still subject to change based on when Harris makes her final decision or whether there's a media leak that impacts the current plan. The rollout on Tuesday will likely look similar to past major announcements, including digital video and social media components, as well as a fundraising appeal, the sources said. Harris' campaign will also disseminate various text messages to its supporters throughout the day, as has been a common practice in the past around big moments. The highly anticipated decision comes after Harris met in person Sunday with three of the contenders who have been under consideration as her vice presidential pick: Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. A source familiar with the meeting said. That was all from NBC News. And with all this speculation and scrutiny over the short list, today, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, Democrat of Massachusetts, told CNN's Casey Hunt that some backlash against Governor Shapiro from Democrats is rooted in anti-Semitism.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who is Jewish, had been considered to be at the top of the list and is now has been the subject of a number of criticisms in the media from left-wing groups in different instances. There's been a focus, for example, on an old opinion piece that he wrote when he was younger about this issue. I'm wondering who you think Kamala Harris should select as her VP and what you make of the way people are approaching and criticizing Josh Shapiro in this moment.
Those in the overly online left who are attacking Josh Shapiro's pro-Israel positions in a different way than they are attacking non-Jewish VP contenders' positions, they're just telling on themselves. There is a strong undercurrent of anti-Semitism to that. It's unacceptable. Every contenders' positions on all policy issues, their track records in elective office, all of that is fair game. That is totally open to be subjected to interrogation and to questioning by the Harris team, by observers, but holding him to a different standard because of his religion just simply isn't who we are as a Democratic Party. Who we are as a Democratic Party is an institution with a ton of talent, though. It's been the most exciting thing for me these last few weeks is just how deep this bench is, and this is just a very small preview of it. People like Gina Raimondo haven't even really been able to demonstrate their talent. My own governor, Maura Healey. This party has so much to offer for the future, for a future of more freedom, for a future of more breathing room for Americans as they make their way through an economy where costs have become a critical issue. And on the other side of the aisle, you've just got Donald Trump and J.D. Vance offering the past, offering to take us backwards as a country, offering to insult millions of Americans, particularly women, who are going to be the decisive votes in this election.
Congressman Jake Auchincloss, Democrat from Massachusetts, on CNN today. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Democrat, on Friday answered questions during a news conference about that more than 30-year-old op-ed he wrote on the Middle East.
The Philadelphia Inquirer is writing about a 1993 college article you wrote where you expressed skepticism about a two-state solution. I understand you do support a two-state solution now. Can you kind of just talk about that evolution?
Something I wrote when I was 20? Is that what you're talking about? I was 20. Look, I have said for years, long before October 7th, that I favor a two-state solution. Israelis and Palestinians living peacefully side by side, being able to determine their own futures and their own destinies, being able to work as they want and worship as they want, and understand the power of living peacefully side by side and how that will lift up both parties in this, or both sides of this conversation. This is obviously a very challenging situation and has been for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. It is my hope that we can see a day where peace will reign in the Middle East, where there will be a two-state solution, where all leaders involved in the conversations will respect the other side and show a willingness to make the hard choices to find peace. And I hope that the U.S. government will always be a partner in peace and trying to find a path forward in the Middle East.
Governor, do you think the Israelis...
She had a question. Go ahead.
Do you think the Israelis assassination of two leaders this week, one in Iran, one in Beirut, were proper?
I think that's a question for the national security team, who has a lot more information on the circumstances surrounding that.
Do you think...
You need me to hook you up with an interview with somebody else here, Cole? You keep asking me questions that aren't for me.
Who's here, Governor?
Go ahead.
Do you think if Vice President Harris picked anyone from Pennsylvania to be her running mate, that would help them win the state?
You're like, I'm not doing the hypothetical game. The Vice President has a deeply personal decision to make. She will make the right decision for her and for the country.
Governor Josh Shapiro, Democrat from Pennsylvania, at Cheney University of Pennsylvania on Friday. He was there to talk about the state budget priorities, but reporters taking the opportunity to ask him about his views on the Middle East. There are congressional primaries in 4 states on Tuesday: Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington State. One race being closely watched is Missouri's 1st district, where, as a Slate article explains, progressive Congresswoman and squad member Cori Bush is in the fight of her political life in Missouri, hoping a grassroots campaign can fend off a well-funded primary challenge from local prosecutor and Democrat Wesley Bell. A key difference between these two Democrats is the backing of the influential American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. Bell has it, and Bush does not. That was from Slate. Here's some of the ads running in that race.
The record shows Cori Bush has never passed a single bill into law. She's missed more votes than almost anyone in Congress. And when Cori Bush does vote, she voted against Biden's debt ceiling bill, putting Social Security payments and our entire economy at risk. No wonder she's rated one of the least effective Democrats in Congress.
I think Cori Bush has her own agenda, and Cori Bush is her agenda.
UDP is responsible for the content of this ad.
I'm Mike Brown Sr. After the murder of my son, Wesley Bell promised to pursue justice for my family.
My brother deserved justice.
I feel like he lied to us. He never brought charges against the killer. He never walked the streets of Ferguson with me. He failed to reform the office. He used my family for power, and now he's trying to sell out St. Louis. He doesn't care about us.
Cori Bush does.
I'm Cori Bush, and I approve this message.
Some of the ads in Missouri's 1st congressional district race. The primary is tomorrow. UDP, that was referenced in the first ad, is United Democracy Project. It's the political arm of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. TheHill.com has a story. Progressive allies of Congresswoman Cori Bush will hold a virtual rally Monday ahead of her high-stakes primary on Tuesday, which could deal another blow to a squad House member. The virtual event will be held over Zoom on Monday night and feature various left-wing allies of Bush, including Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, Congressman Jamal Bowman, Democrat of New York, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat of Michigan, and Congresswoman Summer Lee, Democrat of Pennsylvania, and Democratic Senate candidate Hill Harper of Michigan. That was from The Hill. Another congressional primary being watched on Tuesday. This from a Politico article. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump endorsed a second GOP candidate in a Washington state congressional district, an attempt to guarantee the ouster of Congressman Dan Newhouse. Trump endorsed Tiffany Smiley on Truth Social late Saturday, calling her a tremendous America First candidate. He said he continued to endorse Jared Sessler in the same 4th District race, adding that both had his complete and total endorsement. They are both running against a weak and pathetic rhino, Dan Newhouse, who stupidly voted to impeach me for absolutely no reason, and he now strongly wishes he didn't make that decision, Trump said. Newhouse was one of 10 Republicans in the House who voted to impeach Trump in 2021 after the January 6th Capitol riots, and he is one of only 2 remaining in the House after the 2022 midterms, along with David Valadao, Republican of California. The others either retired or were defeated in their primaries, including Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming, and Jamie Herrera Butler, another Republican from Washington State. That was all from Politico. Here are some of the ads from the incumbent and the 2 Republicans endorsed by Donald Trump in this race.
When liberals like Jay Inslee tried to use the pandemic to take away our gun rights, Dan Newhouse fought back. Dan wrote the bill to prevent state and local officials from enacting arbitrary gun restrictions, to support law enforcement, home defense, and to name firearms dealers as essential workers. Dan Newhouse is a proven conservative with an A rating from the NRA, and I trust him to protect our Second Amendment rights.
I'm Dan Newhouse, and I approve this message because Biden and Inslee want to take your guns, and I won't let them.
As a Trump-endorsed candidate for Congress against Dan Newhouse, I knew I'd be attacked from multiple fronts. But some of the lies my opponents have been spreading are downright ridiculous. So let's settle the beef. I'm a cattle-raising, gun-carrying, brisket-loving conservative, and I believe in the American dream. I believe in lower taxes and that our farms and ranches make us prosperous and more secure. Eastern Washington deserves a representative that is honest and transparent. So vote for the conservative we deserve. I'm Jared Sessler, and I approve this message.
I grew up picking cherries right here in this orchard. Bumps and bruises on us, never on them. If only Congress worked that way. Professional politicians look out for themselves, while working families suffer from inflation, open borders, drugs, and crime. We can do better. We can secure our border and make life affordable again by picking better people to fight for us in Congress. I'm Tiffany Smiley, and I approve this message.
Some of the ads in Washington State's 4th District race. Tuesday, again, the incumbent is Dan Newhouse, who is one of the last 2 members of the House on the Republican side who voted to impeach former President Donald Trump, and the 2 others you heard, Tiffany Smiley and Jared Sessler, both endorsed by Donald Trump. Washington State's Secretary of State website reads that the Washington top 2 primary allows voters to choose among all candidates running for each office. Voters do not have to declare a party affiliation to vote in the primary. Candidates for partisan office may state a preference for a political party, which is listed on the ballot. The 2 candidates who receive the most votes in the primary election qualify for the general election. Candidates must also receive at least 1% of the votes cast in that race to advance to the general election. So the top 2 vote getters will be advancing to the general election regardless of party in that primary. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, today announced that the special election to fill the vacant seat in Texas' 18th congressional district following the death of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a Democrat, will be on November 5th, the same day as the general election. Candidates must file applications by August 22nd to be on the ballot. Congresswoman Jackson Lee died earlier this month at age 74 after serving in Congress nearly 30 years. From USA Today, Hurricane Debby, now a tropical storm, roared ashore Monday along the Big Bend coast of Florida, flooding streets and causing widespread power outages as the storm continued toward Georgia and South Carolina, where it's expected to cause catastrophic flooding this week. Debby, the 4th named storm of what is expected to be a historic hurricane season, made landfall Monday at 7 a.m. near the coastal town of Steinhatchee as a Category 1 storm with maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour, according to the National Hurricane Center. Steinhatchee, home to some 500 people, is just 10 miles from where Hurricane Idalia came ashore last year. After more than 3 hours moving across northern Florida, Debby was downgraded to a tropical storm with sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. That was from USA Today. Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, gave a couple of updates today at the Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee. Here's the one from about 3 p.m. Eastern.
It did make landfall earlier today near Steinhatchee, near Taylor and Dixie counties. We're still at a level 1. We are now at maximum sustained winds around 65 miles per hour, but that will likely continue to weaken over the next 48 hours. We do anticipate flooding in the northern part of the state, not just for the direct impacts of the rain, but also as southern Georgia gets soaked, that water makes its way down to Florida as well. The Florida Division of Emergency Management has completed 435 storm-related missions, and they are currently in the process of completing another 400 more. These are requests from counties and other local entities for assistance on storm response. Some of the examples are high water vehicles, generators, and providing additional personnel. As of this morning, about 250,000 Floridians are without power. 113,000 for private utilities, 111,000 for co-ops, and 20,000 customers for municipal utilities. We do have a lot of assets available that are going to help connect people back, and in fact, over 450,000 accounts have been restored since the storm began, and we're of course going to continue to help to make sure that everybody's back online. We do have 17,000 linemen that are available for help. We have, because of some of the things that we've done in the past, recognized that there does need to be a mutual aid from time to time. We did sign legislation recently ensuring that utilities seeking state support for power restoration are willing to accept this mutual aid. It's really important. We're ready to assist. We want to assist. We mentioned constructing about 9,400 feet of flood protection devices supporting critical infrastructure against flooding from the storm. This has been done for things like hospitals in the past. This time it was deployed around utility substations, and I'm pleased to report that all the flood control barriers that were erected around utility substations ahead of the storm have successfully protected those facilities from stormwater damage. So we have 250,000 without power. Probably would have had more if not for that. So I think that was successful deployment of resources. They also protected lift stations, bridges, residential areas, animal shelters, and healthcare facilities.
Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican from Florida, at the Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee mid-afternoon. Statement from the White House today, attributable to a White House official. This morning, President Biden was briefed on the administration's ongoing response to Hurricane Debby. On Saturday, President Biden approved Florida's request for an emergency declaration and deployed rescue personnel, meals, and water. Our administration is in touch with officials from Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, and FEMA has deployed staff to Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina to assist as needed. We urge residents to remain cautious and listen to state and local officials. That was the statement from the White House. And the Weather Channel reports that the National Hurricane Center stated in their Monday morning discussion that potentially historic heavy rainfall across southeast Georgia and the coastal plain of South Carolina through Saturday morning will likely result in areas of catastrophic flooding. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.